Okay, we're on to the second lesson, kind of focused on body mechanics, quick gestures. Let me just reiterate that the whole point here often is that you want these quick gestures, and your goal is for construction and maybe coming back. Avoid the feeling the need for perfection. So even if you look at all of these lines, these straight lines that were drawn, most of them were drawn about at a 30-degree angle, my page at a 30-degree angle relative to me and my body position to this sketchbook. But they're not all perfect, and that's okay. I mean, we are, again, striving not for perfection, but the goals oftentimes when you're sketching for design are not to create the most beautiful sketch. They are to communicate effectively the ideas that are in your head. So let's move from straight lines, which are actually a little bit more difficult than the first exercise we're about to do. Let's go over to the next page. I want to use this page over here. It's I don't know, the third page in my sketchbook. But what I want to do is now orient this thing to where I get to draw long arcs. And so we talked about in the last exercise that you want to open up your shoulder and your elbow and maybe let your wrist sway a little bit as you sketch a straight line. For this first arc, I want you to intentionally try and draw an arc that the radius of that arc is equal to the distance from your pen tip to the meat, either your elbow or the meat of your muscle right here by your elbow. And so what I'm going to do is actually set my elbow down on the drawing surface, and I'm going to almost remain extremely rigid from my elbow to the pen tip. And the whole goal is that I'm just rotating about that point. I would be curious over the years how many of my sketches just basically included this arc. If I was drawing an arc or a curved surface or whatever it may be, just this arc, simply because it's a natural component of my body and doesn't require any additional wrist. So there's a big arc. I guess that's an arc that's somewhere, if I measure, this is all in millimeters, that arc radius, it's somewhere around 34 to 35 millimeters. Well, if we were going to do something, 2/3 of that, then all of a sudden I'm going to do the same thing. I'm still going to use my elbow as a hinge point, but I'm going to start to introduce some wrist. So it's both what we just did and then also some wrist from start to finish. And so let's make some tighter arcs. And again, the whole thought here is that with ballpoint pen, I can vary the weight. And the amount of wrist that you would introduce to your elbow is going to vary, and the amount of elbow, in fact, that you would use would vary based upon what you're trying to hit. Oftentimes, when you're drawing an arc, you might even plot a few points that you're trying to go through and start out not necessarily by drawing it, but ghosting in a sketch gesture to find out what that optimal arc needs to be. So what happens if we need something that's even tighter? Well, now all of a sudden there's this becomes a way more complex a kinematic exercise. So all of a sudden, if I want a tighter arc or something about like this, let's drop in a few points. I want to go, through those 3 points, and notice that not only do I don't really have elbow anymore, but I've got this quick gesture that is mostly wrist, but I'm also extending my fingers a little bit and pulling them back in to get these tighter arcs. All right, so there are arcs. Both, and notice that these are much cleaner. These are a little bit less clean. I've introduced more body mechanics. Here I've introduced even more kinematics, and they are the least consistent out of this group. All right, let's move from arcs into circles and even ellipses. So I want to talk about circles for a second. The way that I like to draw circles, at least in construction, is I like to ghost in the diameter of the circle and then just kind of let my pen fall. And I'll create 2 or 3 revolutions, unless I nail it the first time, which is rare. And again, what I'm trying to do right now is basically minimize the line weight, because if I was drawing freehand, I would sketch in a circle like this, and then I would come back in and either with a circle template or just drawing slower, draw a little bit of that circle at a time, finding what ultimately would be kind of the median of all of these revolutions. I can kind of imagine where that circle is. I'm probably going to use a line that's somewhere in between these two and then come around. And I'm trying to find kind of the average of each of those revolutions that I created very quickly to lay down a darker object line. And what you'll also notice as I did that is I'm still rotating my page. I'm still trying to find the optic. If I'm putting an arc in there somewhere, I want it to be somewhere in this zone. And so I rotated that around. If I was going to draw this portion of this circle, I'm going to start it out here just a little bit and come around like so. So there's circles. Let's talk ellipses. So when you draw a circle in perspective, ultimately it turns out to be an oval or an ellipse. And one of the things that I will most often do when drawing a circle in perspective or an ellipse is I'll start out by drawing the minor axis. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw a line. Notice the angle. That one was really about 45 degrees, the angle that I had that at, but a straight line. And what that line is going to do is it's going to determine the angle of my ellipse. We'll talk about this in much more detail when we get into drawing ellipses. But what I like to do with the angle of that ellipse is I like to set it up perpendicular to my optimal straight line angle. And similar to the circle, I want to kind of ghost in an ellipse. I'm going to draw something like a 20-degree ellipse. I'm using that line as reference to ultimately bisect the ellipse that I'm about to draw. So that half of that ellipse and this half of the ellipse should be mirror images of one another, or equal, or bisected. And so that minor axis, I'm just going to label it MA right now. That minor axis is cutting through and bisecting my ellipse across its shortest distance. And so that's like a 20-degree ellipse. Depending upon where your circle is in your perspective grid, you might have different degrees. So here's another ellipse that's a larger degree. Again, my goal is that this line is bisecting that. I'm drawing the ellipse so that it is bisected by the original line, regardless of the degree. And again, this is something that I'd either slow down to draw an object line like we did over here. I'd either slow and put more pressure if I'm drawing freehand, or I might grab this is an ellipse template that would help me hit that ellipse with more precision.